Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate all of these opportunities to get to speak and share some of this information. So important to take some time and think about the best ways to care for ourselves and understand the road ahead. Today's webinar, I'm going to talk about, coping with cancer. I've organized some of it as if you're newly diagnosed. But that being said, all of the information within is relevant to wherever you are in the cancer journey, whether you are newly diagnosed and joining us today, whether you are in the midst of active treatment, whether you're out of treatment, or whether you're dealing with ongoing metastatic disease. All of the things that I'm talking about really are about you and about taking a moment today to stop and reflect on the ways that you've always cared for yourself and new ways that you might need to cultivate to kind of find your way through. So today also as we begin, hold on, I gotta flip over here. There we go. It would be great if you could find a scrap piece of paper and a pen and take some notes, and not only notes on what I'm saying, but notes that are driven by what I'm saying. So if what I say triggers something within you, write it down. It's always my hope when I do these talks that it's kind of like having an individual counseling session in math. I'm going to talk to a lot of you, but I really want you to hear as though I'm only speaking to you, because we all cope in very personal and very unique ways. And part of this journey is figuring out what's going to work for you. So as we go through, kind of the way this is organized is beginning to understand how to take care of yourself starts with being able to name the emotion that you're feeling. If we don't know what it is we're feeling, if we're confused and uncertain, then it's hard to know exactly how to take care of that feeling and to take care of ourselves. When I sit in my office with people who have come to me, I find that the beginning of that work is often listening very closely to the ways that they've always taken care of themselves, the things you've always historically done that have worked for you and been healthy and helpful. So part of this is also being able to articulate that. Some of those behaviors we just do automatically, but the practice of actually naming it and identifying what we've always done that has always worked and helped us is important. Cultivating in the same regard, cultivating new coping behaviors. So how do we begin to look at what are some new ways of taking care of ourselves that might be important to think about and develop today? And then, there's a lot of talk out about resilience and the characteristics of what makes someone resilient. And in fact, there's a lot of research around this. And there are some specific characteristics of people who are resilient. You have some of those. We all are resilient in our own ways. So how can you begin to recognize, the way that I do this or that is helpful to me, it's unique to me, it's something that it works for me as I cope with cancer. And then what are some other traits of resilience that maybe you might want to begin to strengthen or work on as in the path ahead? The emotional spectrum of cancer. So when you first hear that word or all along the way, these are just some of the feelings that I hear and that I know about in my office, and I hear you say to me and are part of this story. You'll notice when you look at the screen that there's not just dark feelings here. There's also feelings strengthens relationship or renewed appreciation for life. That people feel fear, definitely, and worry and sadness and loss. But I also hear people also talk to me about a razor-sharp focus of what matters a great deal to them. All are strengthened relationships. And I think it's very important that we also recognize and give some attention to the other side of the feelings that come up when the word cancer enters the picture. But back to naming the feelings. Self-care is often very dependent upon the feelings that you're experiencing, because we attend to feelings in different ways. The way that we take care of ourselves when we feel very sad looks very different than when we feel anger. Looks very different than when we feel jealous or guilty. So beginning to kind of work and listen closely to yourself and try to name the specific feelings that you're having, that's a good practice to get in the habit of. Later in this presentation, I'm going to talk more about this, but I think there's a lot of merit to thinking also about how does an emotion sit in your body. And does that make sense when I say that? That, you know, I sit in my office often right across from people that I'm talking to, and we begin our session, and they're like all tangled up in a ball. Legs are crossed, shoulders are high, arms crossed into their body, very tight. And then as we begin to talk, they relax and their bodies shift. Are you aware of the way in which different feelings rest in your body? Some people get knots in their stomach. Some people get headaches. Some people feel very, very tired, or their shoulders feel hard. You know, so what happens for you? That's a good thing to begin to learn. Become familiar with the buildup of an emotion, so you're able to take care of yourself early on. You know, and that's why I sometimes mention your body, because many people that at least I'm working with recognize a change or a shift in their physical body before they even register that they are feeling frustrated or irritable. And somehow they tense up, or they feel sick, or they feel tired, and then as the day goes on, then the feeling begins to manifest itself a little bit more overtly. So if you can begin to recognize the subtle, slow start of the feeling, that's when you need to step into self-care. And that's actually a hard habit to get into. At least that's what I'm watching. I feel it for myself, too. I don't know. Early on, we feel there's just the early rumblings of an unpleasant feeling. We grit through. We, dig in, grab on. You know, I just got to push through this emotion. Wouldn't it be gentler on ourselves if it was in that moment that we took a break and we took care of ourselves before we hit complete explosion level or exhaustion level? And then what does each different feeling need? We're going to talk a little bit more about that, but I strongly believe that we need to have many different coping behaviors in our toolbox, because different feeling states require different ways of attending to them. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that, and I'm going to challenge you to think about that for yourself. But before we can begin to, this quote I like, before we can expect to consciously direct our lives, to begin to attend to these feelings and take care of ourselves, we need to be able to consciously direct our intention. So I've already begun to talk about that. How can we begin to learn to tune in, to become more self-aware? What does the feeling feel like in our body? I find in my office, and I don't know if all of you sitting there today can listen to this and kind of figure out who you might be in this scenario, but I find that sometimes I sit across from people who are thinkers, and sometimes I sit across from people who are big-time feelers. Thinkers are feelers. And my thinkers in the office are talking to me about all of their thoughts. So I think that this, and I think that if just this would happen, then I would be better. And I think that if the doctor were to say this, and I think that if my sister would say, I think. And I'm like, well, how does that make you feel? Well, I think that, and their immediate answer to that is about a thought, or I think, and this is I think that these people are feeling this way about me. It's a lot of thought-driven, very in your head thinking. My feelers in the room are usually spilling over in tears, or there's a lot of energy and irritation and anger. There's a lot of big feelings sitting in the room. And when I say to them, what are you thinking about? It's making me so sad. They can't hardly even find the words to articulate what's behind the depth of that feeling. It's very hard to get to that thought. Do you know who you might be? Who are you? And that might be very quick. You know, I find that when I give this talk and I'm looking into an audience, people are nodding or their eyes are getting bright. And they immediately know who they are in that scenario. That's something maybe to think about or to know. In my work, when I'm sitting across from my thinkers, part of our work is challenging thinkers to begin to tune into the feeling that they are also having along with those thoughts. What are the feelings there? Do you have a good repertoire of feeling words to even use beyond happy, sad, angry? Do you have more feeling words that you can use to describe how you're feeling? Irritable, frustrated, jilted, angry, guilty, regretful. What are all the feelings that you're feeling? If you're a feeling person, and you find those tears coming so quickly and it's hard to understand, then maybe it's something to challenge yourself with, is to sit with that feeling and really tune it in and begin to consider, what am I thinking about as I have this feeling? What thoughts in my head are making me suddenly feel so sad, frustrated? What is that? Does that make sense? Finding the opposite side of that. Because oftentimes they go together. And in the work I do too, what I'm always listening for is that sometimes those thoughts, and I'm referring in this slide to the voice. I'm calling those thoughts the voice in your head. The voice in your head is telling you some things that may not be exactly accurate or may be just a tiny bit distorted. And if that thought is distorted, well, then the feeling is also can be intense or distorted. But it's important to not judge that. That's okay. The voice is well-intentioned. It's doing its best to keep you safe, but it's working on outdated guidelines. And we have to, and it keeps us from being in the present. What do I mean by that? What is this voice that I'm talking about? Here are some ideas, some automatic thought traps. And these are ones I hear about all the time in my office. The voice that can be all or nothing, black or white, magnifying or minimizing situations, mind reading, so concluding that someone is reacting negatively to you, catastrophizing, that's the shoulds, musts, and oughts. That's a trap for a lot of people. Here's the thing. Every single one of us has these thought traps that we get in the way of. I do. We all do. And there's some benefit to taking a look at this list or beginning to consider, oh, wow, that's my tendency. That's the one I tend to do. I am a very big should, must, ought person. Because when you identify what your common tendency in your thought trap is, you're going to catch it more quickly. You're going to recognize it when you begin to think that way. And then you can begin to counter that thought or consider that there may be other avenues, other ways of thinking about the same scenario. There's wisdom in thinking about or learning what your thought trap is. You know, I know I've given this talk before, and people are sitting in the audience and they're like, oh, and there's my mother, and there's my best friend, and this is my spouse. So you can see where all of us do this, and it's totally normal. There's nothing wrong with that. But knowing what you tend to do in your thinking that may or may not work for you is the beginning of learning how to take care of yourself and increasing your self-awareness. So let's take worry. Worry, I find, is often the seed. Anxiety, the seed of worry and anxiety is often unanswered questions. And I don't know if you would agree with that. It's something that feels terribly uncertain. You have a question mark about that breeds and spurs worry. How can you begin to identify the questions that are behind that? Make a list and get down to it. Can you find answers to those questions? So when you think about your worry and your anxiety, A, can you find the questions that you're feeling worried about? Who can you go to find answers to those questions? Are they things that you can talk over with your doctor or look at in follow-up visits? Are they questions about when you should contact your medical team, why, what things are important to talk over with a doctor, and what things you need to begin to learn are a normal part of this experience? I don't know. These are things to talk over with your doctor. What are your questions? Did your treatment put you at risk for the future, or how will those things be monitored? You might have your own list of questions, and they may have some things to do with medical. They may be questions about finances that you want to sit with somebody and talk through. They may be questions about practical issues in your life. Who's going to take care of X, Y, and Z if I'm in the hospital, or if I am ill on a certain day, not feeling up to it? Where can I begin to find answers to these questions so I regain a sense of control? Taking action. So again, in my office, when we're actively working here and thinking about these thoughts and how they're connected to your feelings and what those traps might be and figuring out questions and where we might find answers, I'm often also talking to people about balancing the what-if statement with what is. We can get caught in what if. What if this, but what if this, what if this? And I hear it all the time in my office, and it's normal, it's understandable. Because there's fear, there's worry and uncertainty. But how can you take that feeling, honor it, validate it, that it's okay and normal to have, but then ground it and anchor it and tie it back to what you know to be true today. What is? How can you use the recent test results, the most recent conversation with your doctor, as things to hold on to as you navigate the time between appointments or the time waiting until you have more information? If you're post-treatment or if you finish in a certain treatment, how do you begin to look and recognize areas of healing? You know, hair growth, is your body rejuvenating and healing, regaining strength or more energy? How do you tune into that and see that in your body? A lot of times people feel very harshly about the treatment they've had. It made them feel sick. It took away a lot of things in their life, but also the treatment you had was so strong and powerful. How do you use that as an anchor to help you feel like you've done something really significant in protecting your health and your future, using the severity or the intensity, rather, of your treatment as a piece of evidence that helps to protect you? A lifestyle decision that you make to support your health, whether that's diet, exercise, sleep, meditation, whatever you maybe decided to grab onto and do for yourself now, be together with friends in a different way, changes in behavior, those things are also what is. That's what you're doing now to keep your now healthy. All of these things that I've talked to up until this point are about how do you come out of that spinning, whirling circle of anxiety and worry and fear and uncertainty and find something to control so that you feel more in control, that you feel grounded. And it's your best effort to get rid of a problem, to solve something that is distressing to you. So I do actually begin as a therapist working with people in this way. How can we minimize this acute stress and find ways to help you feel more control? But now what if you can't control some of your worry and fear? You can't take action and do something to calm yourself. So sometimes we can do all of these things. We can challenge that thinking, but sometimes we can't. You know, I'll never forget working with a young man. Actually, his wife had breast cancer, and he was coming to me for counseling. And we were doing all of this therapy, like trying to balance the what ifs with the what is, and gathering evidence to kind of manage those distorted thought tracks. And, oh, we're working so hard. And he comes into my office one week and he said, you know, Julie, this is so not working for me. And I kind of looked at him and we kind of laughed together, and we also just, you know, it's hard. But I think that's honest, and I think it's real, and there's so much to be said about being aware that sometimes you've just got to let the feeling in and make room. And I like to think of it as kind of greeting a visitor. So, hello, worry, welcome. And they're just here to stay, and you've got to make room. We often fight these feelings so much and resist and want to fix it and problem solve it away. But all of those feelings on that very first screen of mine are normal to have, and they're understandable to have. And in fact, there's nothing wrong, good or bad, about a feeling. A feeling is a feeling. It's not going to hurt you. A feeling is just a feeling. It's what you do with that feeling that can either be helpful or hurtful to us. And maybe sometimes, especially in our culture of not wanting to feel any certain way or another, maybe we've got to get a little bit more comfortable with just sitting and being present.
Hey, Julie?
Yeah.
Hey, you want to speak a little bit closer to the microphone or headset?
Okay, there's that any better?
Yeah.
Can you hear me better now? Okay, good. Thanks for letting me know. I appreciate that. So what I'm talking about is, you know, how do we begin to feel more comfortable, and it's not comfortable, but tolerate at least the ability to sit with hard feelings, resist judging and struggling to fix them, but allowing some space to just let them be with you. The feelings of anger, feelings of sadness, the feelings of worry and fear. And you know what I've noticed is that when we, and this happens in my office a lot, I watch the wave of it. There's a lot of worry that if we let that feeling come in, oh gosh, if I really get into it, I'm going to slide down this slippery slope and I'm never going to get out. and it's going to be really dark there, and it's going to be hard. But what I think I've watched in my office is that when people let that feeling come, it has its time. It comes for a period of time. It's a visitor. And what happens to all visitors? Visitors leave. They don't take up residence. Visitors leave. And it's not until you give yourself permission or you make space to experience that you are able to trust that that will happen. And that visit may be a day, it may be a week, maybe not, but there will come a point when you suddenly look up and you're not consumed with that feeling in the same way that you were. There's waves to the emotion. Until you will let yourself experience it, you're not able to trust that, in fact, those big feelings happen in waves. And how you begin to learn with that and learn to live despite the presence of those feelings. You can't learn to do that until you experience them. Do you have more than one feeling at a time? Probably. You know, and I think that that's the complexity of having cancer, is that you can feel both great sadness and also gratitude for people in your life. So there's multiple feelings happening at once, and that's confusing and complicated. Are the feelings contradictory? How do you attend to these feelings, and what do you need? What do you need to do? You know, so I'm going to move on to this next slide of sadness and anger. I'll talk about sadness and anger. Much like thinking and feeling, I watch and I come to realize throughout the years of my practice that sadness and anger are often a team, too. And that there are people that I work with whose first emotion is sadness, and they get very, very upset and sad, and that feeling is fragile. It's very vulnerable. Sadness is very vulnerable. And when I'm working with people who are sad, often part of the work is to help them find their anger. What's not okay about this? What is not fair? What have they lost? And if they find that same anger, it's something to give them energy to focus and to move. Now, conversely, I also have people that I work with in my office who are fighting mad and angry at their doctor and angry that they're at their family and just mad. And when we allow, after we give some time for that totally justified anger, how then do I sit with them and say, and what's under that anger? And more often than not, what I find is the tears are there and they're deeply, deeply hurt and sad. And they need more space and time to get comfortable getting into that sadness. Those feelings need one another, but they require different ways of taking care of themselves. Sadness, as when you look at this slide, sadness is vulnerable. It's fragile. So when you're feeling deep sadness, back to that very beginning of this presentation about learning to identify the emotion and that all emotions need maybe different ways of caring for them. When you feel deep sadness, what helps you feel safe? A lot of times we need to feel if we're vulnerable in that sense, we need to feel safe. So where do you feel safe enough to be really sad? Many, I think people are very private with their sadness, and they cry alone, or they cry as they go to sleep, or many people cry in the shower. Where they feel safe, where they feel okay being vulnerable. It's probably not a feeling that you allow everybody in your life to be a part of. Maybe just those very trusted, intimate few who know how to care and comfort you. But they pay very close attention to what makes you stop crying. So I'm speaking to each of you, and as you're listening, next time, can you watch and self-observe what stops you crying? Is it that you just got to go someplace? Is it the clock, you've got to move on? Or is it thinking about your kids? Is it thinking about your family? Is it thinking about you just fall asleep? That's important to know, because then you can use that in the future to help pull you through as you kind of go through the wave of sadness. Now, on the other hand, anger is a very active emotion, and you can't do yoga with anger. It requires something very active, and then you're fired up and you're ready to defend yourself and jump into action. So anger, You can go for a run, you can do something, you can yell, you can ventilate to somebody that it will hear you without judging and without jumping to conclusions. You can do all of those things with anger. It also can rally you to do something to change the situation. So that's why I'm saying sometimes when I'm having people feel very sad, if we find their anger can motivate them to put something in effect to change what's happening. What can you do with that energy? What can you do with all the energy of anger? And do you know your triggers for anger? That's an important thing to begin to attend to. What really fires you up? Some people get very fired up about conversations about faith and as it relates to cancer. Some people get very fired up about when people are trying to give them advice or guidance. There are many different types of triggers that people can experience with regard to anger. What might be some of yours? Self-care. I talked about this just a little bit earlier, but recognizing what your triggers are, recognizing if there's certain people or external events, what those things are, because when you begin to name and identify your triggers, then you can protect yourself and be a little and help yourself stay safe around those. Now, unfortunately, with triggers, you often don't know a trigger until you meet it. And so, I've talked to people before that have felt overwhelming emotion as they walk by their cancer center unexpectedly, or when they go to a diner. I remember one woman I was working with did not even realize it, but as she drove by the diner where she always went after every radiation, that just brought it all back for her. A song on the radio, certain people. So as you begin to recognize what your triggers are, just keep adding that to your list so that you know how to protect yourself around those things. And beginning to learn your warning signs like I talked about. So the build up to an emotional moment. Actually, emotions don't go from 0 to 60. There is a ramp. And as you begin to get more tuned into yourself and aware, you can put in and begin to take care of yourself earlier. And I just said so certain people can be a negative trigger. Certain people are also really good for you. Their energy is helpful to you and supportive to you and grounding to you. Do you know who those people are too? That's important. Bringing it back to your body. We've already talked a little bit about knowing where emotions fit for you. I find that worry and fear in particular are very heavy. They're very much in your thoughts. So how can you, in those moments, catch yourself and reconnect with your body? And that's something I can watch too, is that people can get very disconnected from their body. And at the risk of sounding zen and yogini-ish, there is great power in breath and in grounding behaviors for the ways that they bring the pace and the intensity of how you're feeling. They slow it down. So when you take long, slow breaths, that's physiologically delivering oxygen all over your body, and your body feels a change from that. Remembering it's changing the pace of your heart rate. So when we attend back and get reconnected to our bodies, it often changes how we're feeling. You have that power. I often say to people, if the thoughts in your head have the ability to cause this much distress, that same brain of yours, those same thoughts of yours can also calm your body down. You can use that same powerful head to do the other thing as well, to take care of yourself. When I say grounding, I think people sometimes are like, that sounds like a really vague catchphrase, and they don't quite know what that means, but really it truly means getting yourself into the ground, grounding. So putting your feet on the ground, touching your body, so give yourself a hug, making sure that you feel present. How do you feel present? If you're feeling an anxiety, emotional moment, change your location. If you're sitting down, stand up, walk around the room. If you're walking around outside, take a break, go in and sit down. And moving from inside to outside. A lot of these things can change the bubble and help you to kind of get out of your head and get into the moment, into your body. We've been talking a lot about coping behaviors and taking care of yourself and how do you attend to different things. All of these strategies are ways that you can take care of yourself now There are also ways that, frankly, as you move beyond cancer or through your life, you can use always. So there's benefit to thinking about this way of being self-aware. I talked earlier in the presentation about resilience and what qualities the research has found exist within particularly resilient people. I think there's sometimes a myth or a thought that resilience is a genetic trait. You know, you come from a positive, Pollyanna, optimistic genes, and then that's just how you're wired. That's part of your temperament. No, it's actually not true. We are all born with an innate resiliency, an inborn capacity for self-righting, for moving through the hard and challenging moments. It's knowing your particular brand of resilience and what you do that makes you get up from morning to night. And I say to people a lot of times when they're sitting in my office and they're feeling the acuteness of the crisis and that things are particularly hard. I often say, you're sitting in front of me right now. You're right here. How'd you get here? Something has gotten me here. And we need to look at what that is, because something is at work. Even though it feels like everything is falling off the rails, something within you is at work. And we need to figure out what that is. Resilience can be found in a variety of thought processes and behaviors, and they can be learned and fine-tuned and built like muscles over the course of a lifetime. And resilience develops as people grow and develop better thinking, self-management, and that better word is a little bit judgmental, but they develop new ways of thinking, self-management skills, or knowledge. So as you begin to understand the uniqueness of you and your tendencies in thought and your things that really, really work well for you and lend to a very a day that feels better than others, what do you begin to learn about yourself, and how do you cultivate more of that? Resilient people often find meaning even in times of trouble and gain confidence from overcoming adversity. In this way, resilience can contribute to a deeply satisfying life. And there's a lot that says, resilience and happiness are closely linked. But I always want to be careful of that, because I don't want people ever to think that any of this thought challenging or resilience is all about thinking your way to feeling better, or positive Pollyanna, or positive. It's not about that. I think it's about being honest, and it's about being authentic and genuine and recognizing what is really working for you and what tends to get in your way. It's not about being positive necessarily. It's about listening and tuning in. And that gratitude and that contentment often comes from that. It breeds more positive emotions. But it's about being true to yourself and learning what you need and honoring that. Whether that is, I need to have a day of just sitting and crying and being upset, that is what I need today. I need to care for that feeling, then that is going to be part of your self-care. Positive emotions help us build skills and internal resources in a larger repertoire of assets. So one of the reasons why I talk about resilience is that as you begin to fine-tune and identify your particular traits of resilience, then you focus on that, and that breeds more resilience. When you begin to feel better, then you're better able to explore. There's like an upward spiral of well-being. When we feel better, we're more likely to explore and take care of ourselves in new ways. And we identify other behaviors that work for us, and then that makes us feel better. And then feeling better makes us more likely to explore and try new things. So all of that is an upward spiral to well-being. In other words, happy people become more satisfied, not simply because they feel better or because they're happy, but because they're developing the resources and the strategies for living well. And by living well, that's a personally defined definition for everybody. The you inventory. So as you think about yourself, what underlying qualities would you want others to know about you? Did you learn anything new as you were diagnosed? What things are you figuring out about yourself that maybe you never realized? And are these qualities important in your relationships with others? And what are the 1, 2, or 3 things that you just hold? You don't have to put a billboard up about this. It's a little bit about feeling proud. It's a little bit about the development of a healthy ego. That's okay. Those things are important to kind of own, even if it's a private conversation. I get asked a lot about what's the difference between just feeling simple sadness, maybe even grief. There's a lot of grief in a diagnosis of cancer. What's the difference between feeling sad and grieving and then feeling a clinical depression? What's the difference there? How will I know if I'm actually depressed? Well, as a professional in my office, I'm listening to that. And that's always something to know. If you're worried about that for yourself, how do you maybe talk to a professional? Talk to somebody. That's our job, to listen in a different way. I'm going to tell you what I'm listening for. That people can be very, very sad. They can be grieving. They can be crying. They can be lost and very low and flat, even in their energy. But even people who are sad and grieving still feel capable. They still feel loved. They still feel surrounded and cared and thought and considered, and that their lives are important and they matter. When I begin to hear people have negative self-talk, things like, it doesn't even matter if I get out of bed or go to work, nobody will ever really miss me there. I'm not doing anything, I don't really contribute anymore. My friends, I don't think you would ever miss me because they're not even calling anymore and invite me out. Nobody they even recognize. When I begin to hear that negative self-talk, I'm going to look a little deeper. And that negative self-talk is speaking to me about self-worth and sense of self. And when those feelings, when those thoughts and feelings begin to bubble, that's when we need to grab on and we need to look at that a little bit more closely. So that's some ways to kind of begin to question and look at yourself. Always something to talk over with a professional, but I look at that and I'm listening to that in a different way. When you're thinking back to resilience and cultivating that, so you're thinking to yourself, okay, so how do I cultivate resilience? How do I begin to identify what my traits and what my characteristics of resilience are? Watch yourself. Be mindfully present. Think about what is happening in your day right now, or what you're going to be doing this evening. What is happening right now? Celebrate everyday successes. They may not be huge. They may not be big. I remember asking a girl when I was working with one, she was feeling flu treatment, and she was adjusting to breast reconstruction, and her hair growing back. And I said, is there anything about
Hey,
your
Julie.
body that you're... Yeah.
Sorry, we're getting a couple of other sound issues again. If you could speak closer.
Okay.
Thanks.
There, can you hear me now? Is that better? No?
Yeah.
Is it better?
Yeah.
Okay. So I remember asking her, what was there anything about you right now or your body right now or this recovery period for you that you can say that you're proud of? Or that is a success, it feels good to you? And she sat and she thought, and it was a hard time. She was not feeling great. And she finally looked at me and she said, well, I guess I like my eyebrows, the shape of her eyebrows. And we kind of giggled and we said, you know what? I said, that's fine. Let's just keep it there. And that sounds so trivial and so trite, but can you find something that you can celebrate? Just something small that you can celebrate and own and feel proud of, feel good about. Play to your strengths. So think back to, if you've been taking notes or thinking about what are qualities about yourself that you know that help you or that work for you, use those strengths, grab onto this, nurture gratitude, random acts of kindness. All of these things cultivate resilience. Let's support who's who and who is available to you along this journey. Where can you go for more support and more information? I talk about this whenever I speak, and in some ways I think there's a benefit to categorize it, called categorizing your people, because then you can know who's available to you for different reasons. So healthcare professionals, as you know, are there for the medical piece of this. You've got your doctors and your nurses that you go to for medical information and for hashing out all of those questions about what your prognosis is and everything related to your diagnosis and even your long-term survivorship. Your peer and other healthcare professionals, are a complementary care. So you can go to people about nutrition questions. There are people available to you for mental health. These are your healthcare professional team. We're part of the net underneath you in this process. Peers. So not your friends from pre-cancer, but those other survivors that you have met along the way, or that you meet in groups, or you meet out in the world, or if you go to a conference, peers, other survivors who quote unquote get it. You don't have to say much. They understand. They're living this day to day, one day at a time. They're facing maybe some of the exact same feelings that you are. They can normalize that and give tips and tricks. Peers and other survivors are an incredible support. And then we have friends and family. And friends and family are people who have known you your whole life. They know your history and how you've always cared for yourself, how you've bounced back from other things, what has been hard for you in the past. They've been with you always. So you have family and friends. Now, you'll see this bubble thing that I've created here at the bottom. I find that family and friends can also be a challenging crowd too, because they may consist of some of the people that have been the most disappointing to you. And so I would like to challenge you to even further break down this crowd and think about all the people in your life, your family, your friends, your coworkers, everybody that surrounds you. And I separated into 3 categories, FDR, so feeling, doing, and respite. So those people in your life that really get you. They know exactly what to say to comfort you. They can celebrate you without feeling jealous or competitive. Those 4 people are your feeling friends. And they are the people that you can cry to and ventilate to. They do know how to respond to you in the right ways. People don't have a ton of those people. 1, 2, 3, that's a high number. Who are your feeling friends? The next crowd is your D friends, your doers. Now, these people care a great deal about you. They really want to support you. Those feelings, they make them nervous and awkward. They don't quite know how to handle that. They don't know how to respond. They're like a deer in headlights, or they run the other direction. But goodness gracious, they want to do something for you. They want to send you cards. They want to make you a meal. They want to inform others and keep other people up to date so you don't have to. They want to support you. But they're probably not the person that you're going to go to with the depth of the feeling. In my experience, this is generally the bulk of people's acquaintances and friends and family. And then you have those select few people who cannot handle the feelings and frankly are way too busy to do anything. And those friends, however, might still be of benefit to you. Because there are times throughout this journey when you're sick and tired of talking about cancer and living in this space. And you can go out with an R friend, a respite friend, and you know what? They're not going to ask you a doggone thing about yourself, and they're going to talk about something else, and they're going to let you distract and escape. Then in some ways, that crowd also has a benefit, and so we have to think about it in different ways. And when I think you categorize it and separate this, then you protect yourself. Because you don't go with your big feelings to a D friend because they're not going to be heard in the right way. You don't ask an R friend to do something for you because they can't. You begin to know who's who in your support picture. Stay in your lane. So often, I used to work at Cancer Care, and we would notice an uptick in the calls that came into the call center on days when a celebrity was diagnosed or when somebody famous would die from cancer. All of those outside influences and external stories of cancer can really trigger intense emotions within people. So how do you find how you stay in your lane and that those emotions of others don't influence you in strong and intense ways? In support groups, it can be very hard to hear variances in treatment plans. Are people doing different types of follow-up care? Because it begins to make you second guess. Again, a red flag, stay in my lane, trust my doctors, know my diagnosis is uniquely mine. Everyone has a personal story, a personal plan. The setbacks are the successes of fellow survivors can trigger about doing cancer well. I hear that a lot in my office. Am I doing enough or am I overdoing it? How do you figure out what's the right balance for you? Make your cancer personal. It's about you. It's your story. There are many of these feelings, thoughts that are universal to having cancer, but a lot of it is also very, very personal in the ways that you've historically coped, in the ways that you're learning to figure out what works for you today. Be gentle with yourself along the way. So remember, these feelings change, can change day to day. So some days, if it's a hard day, maybe something as simple as going to bed and waking up the next morning will shift how you feel. Remembering that way. Do the work. Do the work to learn how to care for yourself. Take some attention and think about these things. Try not to ignore your need to share your worries, your fears, and your questions. If you feel like you've got something you've got to talk through, find that person in your support team that you can and talk it through. Don't ignore those feelings and worries. It's about the ramp up. Attend to those. Often talking with others can help you work through concerns and uncertainties in a natural way. That's often what's happening in my office. People are sitting here and they're talking it through with me. I'm not doing a doggone thing, but listening, and they're finding their way just in talking it through. Listen to yourself. Tune in. Become aware to what you're thinking or feeling, and try not to put on that happy face all too often. I do think that sometimes we can fake it till we make it. Sure, I think there's maybe some benefit in that, but I think a lot of times our true feelings are more helpful to everyone. So that is all that I have, but I think we're going to flip it over to some questions and answers. I know I've spoken a little bit over that time, but Christine, you let me know if there's anything else I need to attend to. Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Okay, so we do have some questions. Thank you so much for your presentation. My favorite slide is always still the FDR slide. I
know, right?
So we do have some questions here. Let's see, which one is the best to start with? Some strategies to deal with hearing about survival statistics that can be stressful.
So in some ways, I think that speaks right to that slide I was just on a moment ago. How do you stay in your lane? So statistics are hard to read. They trigger a lot of fear. They trigger a lot of uncertainty. How in the world are you supposed to stay present when you're functioning out in this unknown land of tomorrow? A little bit of it is thought redirection. How can you figure out how to stay present? What can bring you back to today? At what is versus what if? What do you know about how you feel this moment, how you're doing, what you're feeling, what treatments you're on in your medical team, and trusting them to attend to that for you. And staying in your lane. The statistics are a big snapshot, but everybody is a unique story. We can get swept into that bubble of statistics when really it's made up of individual stories, and they can be different. So staying in your lane and staying present. And I think, that's the thought. Yeah, and that when I said that, I immediately went to the thought problem-solving way of coping with that, right? Those first slides that I was talking about, what is versus what if, gathering evidence, staying present. But you know what? That fear and that worry and that sadness, those are honest feelings. And how do we sometimes just give in to it and be scared and be sad and let other people sit with us in it and be with us and comfort us and be present in that harder feeling? It will shift and change. Remember feelings are visitors, and they will move and change over time.
Great. Thank you, Julie. How can I get my friends and family to understand what I'm going through?
How can I get friends and family to understand? It depends on your friends and family. I mean, some people are better able at listening and working to find empathy and understand what you're going through, but I would venture to say that in some ways there are pieces about this that they will never understand. They will never understand completely. And so it's more about figuring out for you what it is that how other people attend to you, what they say, what they do that works for you, and helping them understand how to support you. They may not ever understand what you're going through, but you can work to help them understand how to best support you. Does that make sense? They're not going to understand what it's like to have a diagnosis of cancer. But when you say, when you do X, Y, Z, that is really helpful to me. When you do this, that makes me feel defensive and irritable and even more anxious and suffocated, whatever it might be, abandoned. But when you do these things, that really works for me. We have to teach people how to care for us. They don't have a manual. So we have to kind of write the manual of, here you go, this is what's going to work for taking care and supporting me today.
Great, thank you. What about strategies that could help with the unique stress of facing metastatic disease?
Yeah, and there are distinct differences to having metastatic disease, for sure. And in some ways, it's the learning to live with that fear and uncertainty, learning how you begin to recognize the ebb and the flow of that feeling and what you do on a particularly hard day that might be different than a different day. As you begin to, that when you're having a day when you're coping better, that's when you embrace getting out and doing things and whatever it might be and attending to other people. Or when you're having a really stressful and anxiety day, that's the day that you come inside. Or maybe it's the reverse. That's when you meet other people. So it's, again, personal, but it's how you're surfing that anxiety, surfing that worry and uncertainty, and also staying in the present as well. That how is your body doing today? How are you responding to treatment today? What is today like? Staying present. You're in this day right now. Let's live in that one.
Got it. So what should a patient do when they're able to find comfort and support from friends or professional support services, but sort of in between those moments of support, their anxiety feels out of control?
Well, that's when your self-coping has to kind of kick into gear, or you're using support of others. So that when you're at, that might be conversations to have with your health professionals, and especially if you're meeting with a therapist. I know in my office, I am often giving people homework. I'm saying to them, between now and the next time I see you, I want you to watch yourself, like fly on the wall, watch yourself. And I want you to come back and I want you to tell me what it is that you're doing that makes you have a great day. Like what happens when you feel like you're having a better day? What's going on for you when you feel very sad? What do you do? Because I think some of this is people beginning to recognize their behaviors they may not know. What are the unique ways to care for yourself? And I'm not just talking about all the things we often read, go to the gym, eat a salad, drink water, get a good night's rest. Those are all very, very important. But I'm really curious about the very personal ways that people find joy, find contentment, find a sense of feeling calm. And I've heard all kinds of things in my office. One of my favorite questions to ask is for people to watch and come back to me and tell me. And I've heard things like, I've said this in talks before, I've heard people tell me, I just have found that it really is distracting and really nice. I love wandering the ethnic aisles of the grocery store. Or I love sitting in a coffee shop and just watching people walk by. It kind of grounded me and made me feel centered. I love going to the farmer's market and wandering around. I don't know what it's going to be for you, but what is the thing that you do that you recognize comforts and takes care of you? Making a cup of tea and snuggling up in a blanket on the couch. What is that? Those are the tools, those are the things you're going to begin to do between appointments.
Again, can you quickly go over the ways to recognize clinical depression as opposed to just sadness?
Yeah, and obviously this diagnosis needs to be made by a professional, right? You can begin to suspect it within yourself, but it's always a good conversation to have or to go further with a doctor. But clinical depression includes, clinical depression is, a lower sense of yourself, your self-worth, who you are relative to others, or to, so when I begin to hear it, and you often hear it in what's called negative self-talk. So people start to say things like, I don't know, I just can't seem to have, I just can't seem to get out of bed in the morning, and there's no use in really going grocery shopping because I'm not cooking anymore. I worry that nobody wants to call me because I've just I'm not contributing to group conversations anymore. I wouldn't even be missed at work because I'm not productive or efficient. I'm the Debbie Downer in every room. Those are examples, and it may look different for you, but it's when I hear that loop of negative self-talk. And again, like I can meet with people who are grieving and they're sad, but they're also very able to say to me, I have amazing friends who love me so much. And I know that through this, I have been an incredible mother to my kids. And I work so hard to stay attentive to them. Or, in the midst of it all, like my body isn't what it used to be, but I'm working to kind of understand how to take care of myself. And I hear that effort and that work in a very different way than that negative self-talk. Does that make sense? Is that clear? Again,
Yeah.
The diagnosis is not made. It's made by a professional, but that's kind of the beginning of that thinking.
Okay, great. What are your thoughts about anti-anxiety meds or antidepressants for cancer patients?
I think that sometimes they can be really helpful. If you have a diagnosis of depression or anxiety, then you probably need the medicine. That my belief is that when there is anxiety and depression, there's probably likely also hormone chemical imbalance that needs to be attended to. And if we can get that attended to, then you can use all of these coping behaviors. So often when people are weighted down by depression or anxiety, and by that I mean that there's an imbalance of serotonin or there's an off kilter of those hormones, then they have intentions to care for themselves. They understand everything I'm saying, but they can't get through the muck. They can't get through the heavy weight of the depression to put those coping behaviors to work. So when people take antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication, it frees them up to begin to take care of themselves. When you can stop that ruminating thinking, then you can begin to attend to the other things in your life that matter a great deal to you. When you can begin to have more perspective and more energy and motivation that gets lightened with an antidepressant, then you can begin to do the behaviors that will help you care for yourself. So I think that there's a great benefit to it when they're needed. Absolutely.
Great, thanks. Just the last question. Any tips on finding a therapist or other kinds of professional support?
Sure. So your medical team should be able to kind of begin to guide you in that direction. So nurses and doctors may have referral sources for you. They might initially begin to refer you to like a social worker within the hospital, and you can see that fit, and you can kind of move from there. There are organizations out there that provide free supportive services. So you can call some of those organizations and see if you can begin to talk to somebody or link into online or telephone support groups, face-to-face support groups. Sometimes people think that they need a therapist, and they may. I'm not minimizing that. But I've also seen the profound impact of support groups. And I used to facilitate lots of support groups. And when people walk in the room and they just have that meeting with each other and they leave and they're like, holy smokes, I feel so much better. I am not going crazy. Everybody's feeling this way. And it's reassuring and it's comforting. So sometimes it's not just finding a therapist. Sometimes it's finding a support group where you can begin to ventilate and share these feelings and shared experiences. Other options available, there are some resources online where you can find therapists like Psychology Today and things like that you can read profiles and find therapists that way too.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Julie. I really appreciate your informative program. Thanks to everybody on the webinar for participating and your good questions. We're gonna shut the webinar down now, and if you could just all wait for one moment, there's going to be a survey that will pop up at the end, and it's really important for us here so we know what you thought of this, and also so you can tell us what other kinds of programs you would like us to give at SHARE. And again, thank you, Julie Larson, for a very informative program.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad I was able to be here.
Okay, thanks.